Now joining us, Eleanor Clift from Newsweek. Eleanor, welcome back to the Young Turks.
Good to be with you.
Great to have you here. First, let's talk about how relevant the Tea Party folks are. How big a movement, in your estimation, do you think it is at this point?
You know, I really am not sure. I did a column for Newsweek, and I described them as the tip of the spear at representing this sort of populist anger in the country. They're disparate. They really don't have a real national leadership. They pride themselves on being disjointed, and you can see all the confusion about the Nashville convention, and there are all these splinter groups. But I, as somebody on the progressive side, I think we ignore them at our peril, and we have to listen to what they represent.
You know, before we get into what they're so motivated by, or as part of that discussion, you're right, they're disjointed, and I don't think every one of them is AstroTurf, and, I know FreedomWorks pushes a lot of this, and they're clearly AstroTurf. Corporate America pays them to push the Tea Party guys in the right direction. But they keep pushing themselves. This Nashville's a mess. Sarah Palin's going to get $100,000. Some people are mad about that. They're not showing up. They got all these different Tea Party teams, the Express, the Patriots, the Colts, the Ravens, and
right.
and the Northern Alliance.
Yeah.
Now, I know all this stuff, but when they actually show up, it seems like it's almost always the organized thing. It's like they don't do the protests without FreedomWorks. Like, do you see what I'm saying? They fight without FreedomWorks,
mm-hmm.
and they do their own little things. But when they're large and they grab the media attention, it almost always is corporate backed, isn't it?
Yeah, but I do think, aside from the more activist core, I do think people are fascinated by it, drawn to it, and I think they're libertarians, really. And I think there's very little that the Democrats can certainly do to please them. I think the Republicans are working very hard to attract them, co-opt them, and that's probably where they'll end up most of the time. But in some areas, they are going to be able to create havoc for the Republican Party as well. I don't know what the returns are in the primary in Illinois, but I'm assuming Mark Kirk, the favorite, who's a moderate, really, in today's Republican Party. I'm assuming he won, but there was a Tea Party candidate. There is a Tea Party candidate.
Right. I don't think they're going to cause the Republicans any damage because they're going to be too disorganized without corporate America pushing them. Because, look, their original anger was supposed to be about the corporate bailouts. Yet there's no protest of Wall Street. There's no protest of Tim Geithner, who's been a terrible
they
treasury.
love the free markets. They extol the free markets.
So wait, how can you have, okay, I love Wall Street and I hate the bailout that they got, that they pushed for?
It doesn't necessarily make sense. And I went to a gathering that they had at FreedomWorks here in Washington last week, and they complain about how their freedoms are being compromised, and they want to organize around, which is the amendment that they're organizing.
10th Amendment.
Yes, to refuse any kind of a health care mandate. And I'm thinking, how much benefit they get from government in their lives if they completely ignore and they see government as infringing on their freedoms. So they really are pretty far out. But again, this poll that's often cited shows that they're more popular to, I guess, the casual observer on the street than the Republicans or the Democrats. They're a vehicle to vent anger against today's political system.
We're talking to Eleanor Clift from Newsweek. Eleanor, two things about that. One, I think that they're partly popular because there isn't an effective argument made against them. No one comes out and debunks the 10th Amendment argument. I mean, have you ever seen a Democratic politician say this is nonsense?
No, I don't think they really take it seriously. And just as I didn't really take the town meetings last August very seriously, I thought it was so over the top. And then it started the pressure on the health care bill, and a lot of those arguments that were made at the town hall meetings really took hold. There hasn't been an effective argument on the other side. I certainly agree with that.
Right, and it's not just against the Tea Party guys. The Democrats never make their own case on anything. It's Bush ripped the Fourth Amendment apart and flushed it down the toilet, and no one complained about the Constitution. I mean, did you see any Tea Party protests about how Bush was destroying the Constitution?
No, but he wrapped it all up in the national security blanket, and I think effectively exploited the fears that people had.
Of course, but see, no one ever makes the case, right? So,
no.
You're making a pro-government case here, and in your article you talk about, do they understand all the benefits that they get from the government, including, for example, the roads that they travel on to get onto their protests, right?
Right.
But very few people make that argument. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is I think that the real cause behind this and why it's so large but yet vague is because there is a real populist anger against the government. Mm-hmm. It's because we feel, both on the left and the right, that the politicians don't have our best interests in mind.
Right.
They have the best interests of the rich and the powerful, which is absolutely true.
Oh, it's correct. It's across the board, right? Mm-hmm.
So, we have the Republicans who are taking advantage of this, very ironically, because no one protects the rich and the powerful better than the Republicans do. Have you seen any hint from the Democrats that they think, oh, right, maybe we shouldn't do one more concession to our lobbyist friends. We shouldn't make one more deal that helps corporate America, or otherwise we're going to be seen as the bad guys here and bear the brunt of that populist anger.
Well, the Democrats get slapped back too easily when the critics say, "Oh, this is this is populism run amok," and then it degenerates into a debate about whether Obama is an authentic populist or not. Is he faking it? And I'm thinking to myself, the guy ought to just be able to have some policies that reward the people who should be rewarded and punish the people who should be punished, instead of the other way around. And the president, I think, is beginning to make a more effective case for himself and his policies. But a lot of ground has been lost this first year, unfortunately. And after the Massachusetts election, it just felt like the whole house of cards, collapsed.
Well, here's one. I totally agree with what you're saying. And in the last segment, we're talking about a couple of Obama proposals that were headed in the right direction: the Volcker rule and new taxes that are going to try to get offshore accounts of the corporate multinational corporations and tax it here in the U.S. as we should, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a couple of tougher proposals and going after the bank bonuses, et cetera, right? But I fear that the problem that the Democrats run into is when they get spooked like this with the Massachusetts election and the Tea Party protests, their reaction is, okay, go further to the right. But when they go further to the right, they make more deals with corporate lobbyists, and they do more concessions that don't help the American people and that don't go towards real change. So they wind up hurting themselves even more. I wonder, and you're inside this, and you can see it better than I can, I think, and you've got your sources. Do they have a grasp on that? Do they get that?
I think they see it as an artful balancing act, and that the budget, which they sent up this week, reflects this attempt to deal with the concern, anxiety, anger about the deficit, which extends beyond the Tea Party movement, but is certainly pushed by them, with this, gesture towards a freeze in the end of next year. And yet he's managed to put some money into the programs that he cares about, and they're still pushing modestly for health care bill as though maybe they can sneak it in while all the rhetoric is still mainly about jobs. Listening to the reports out of New Hampshire today, they got a lot of questions about the health care bill, and Obama's got to be seen as fighting for it, even if he's fighting with the Congress in an effort to get it. I think he'll be punished less. He will. I think the congressmen will be punished if they don't get a bill, but he'll be punished less if he's seen it as at least fighting for issues that the people care about.
Right. I agree with that again. Last question is, I'm trying to ascertain whether the Democratic senators, I think the congressmen get it a little bit better from their actions that I've seen, although they don't, of course, get it altogether that well either. But the Democratic senators understand, hey, if we keep, we think we're being clever by doing bipartisan compromise with the Republicans, right? And then all that does is water down reform, put more lobbyist loopholes. And then Frank Luntz writes a memo telling Republicans, hey, tell everybody there's lobbyist loopholes in the bill and try to kill it, right? When they're the ones that put the lobbyist loopholes in the first place.
Right.
Like, do they understand the game that's being played against them and that they're headed towards an iceberg? Or do you think they still think, no, oh yeah, if we just work with the Republicans,
No, I don't think
solved?
they genuinely believe bipartisanship will pay off. But I think with this, for example, this new credit package for small businesses, which includes tax incentives, the press secretary, Robert Gibbs, put it pretty plainly. This is a test. These are Republican ideas. These are things that they wanted. Will they vote for it? And I think the White House is thinking, well, we're going to put these things out there, and if they don't bite, then we can raise the cost to them politically. I mean, I think that's the extent of the strategy. Whether it results in any legislation remains to be seen.
It does remain to be seen. Okay. Eleanor Clift from Newsweek, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.